All right, back again. I see Nimbus has not reappeared, but hopefully will a bit later on. We're going to move on. We're going to do a few chapters of The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Very popular book, made it into a series of movies, of course. I'm sure you've seen them. And we'll get started. We're on chapter 4. For a few moments, Pete and I take in the scene of our mentor trying to rise out of the slippery, vile stuff from his stomach. The reek of vomit, the raw spirits, almost brings my dinner up. We exchange a glance. Obviously, Humich isn't much, but F.A. Trinket is right about one thing. Once we're in the arena, he's all we've got. As if by some unspoken agreement, Pete and I take one of Humich's arms each and help him to his feet. I tripped? Humich asks. Smells bad. He wipes his hand on his nose, smearing his face with vomit. Let me take you back to your room, says Peter, clean you up a bit. We half lead, half carry Hamish back to his compartment, since we can't exactly set him down on the embroidered bedspread. We haul him into the bathtub and turn on the shower. He hardly notices. It's okay, Peter says to me. I'll take it from here. I can't help but feel grateful, since the last thing I want to do is strip down Hamish and wash vomit out of his chest hair and tuck him into bed. Possibly, Peter is trying to make a good impression on him, to be his favourite once the games begin. But judging by the state he's in, Hamish will have no memory of tomorrow. All right, I say. I can send one of the capital people to help you. There's any number. There's any number on the train, cooking for us, waiting for us, guarding us, taking care of us. It's their job. No, I don't want them, says Peter. I nod and head back to my room. I understand how Peter feels. I can't stand the sight of capital people myself, but making them deal with Hamish might be a small form of revenge, so I'm pondering the reason why he insists on taking care of Hamish, and all of a sudden I think it's because he's just being kind, just as he was kind to give me the bread. The idea pulls me up short. A kind Peter Malark is far more dangerous to me than an unkind one. Kind people have a way of working their way inside me and rooting there. I can't let Peter do this, not where we're going, so I decide, from this moment on, to have as little as possible to do with the baker's son. When I get back to my room, the train is pausing at a platform to refuel. I quickly open the window, toss the cookies Peter's father gave me out of the train, and slam the glass shut. No more. No more for either of them. Unfortunately, the packet of cookies hits the ground and bursts open in a patch of dandelions by the track. I only see the image for a moment because the train is off again, but it's enough. Enough to remind me of the other dandelion in the schoolyard years ago. I just turned away from Peter Malark's bruised face when I saw the dandelion, and I knew hope wasn't lost. I plucked it carefully and hurried home. I grabbed a bucket and Prim's hand and headed to the meadow, and yes, it was dotted with golden-headed weeds. After we'd harvested those, we scrounged along inside the fence for probably a mile until we filled the bucket with dandelion greens, stems and flowers. That night we'd gorged ourselves on dandelion salad and the rest of the bakery bread. What else? Prim asked me. What other food can we find? All kinds of things, I promised her. I just have to remember them. My mother had a book she brought with her from the apothecary shop. The pages were made of old parchment and covered in ink drawings of plants. Neat, handwritten blocks told their names, where to gather them, and when they came into bloom, and their medical uses. But my father added other entries to the book: plants for eating, not healing, dandelions, pokeweed, wild onions, pines. Prim and I spent the rest of the night poring over those pages. The next day we were off school. For a while I hung around the edges of the meadow, but finally I worked up the courage to go under the fence. It was the first time I'd been there without my father's weapons to protect me. but I retrieved the small bow and arrows he had made for me in the hollow tree. I probably didn't go more than 20 meters into the woods that day. Most of the time, I perched in the branches of the old oak, hoping for game to come by. After several hours, I had a good luck to kill the rabbit. I shot a few rabbits before, with my father's guidance, but this I'd done on my own. We hadn't eaten meat in months. The sight of the rabbit seems to stir something in my mother. She roused herself, skinned the carcass, and made stew with the meat and some more greens Prim and I had gathered. Then she acted confused and went back to bed. But when the stew was done, we made her eat a bowl. The woods became our saviour, and each day I went further into its arms. It was slow going at first, but I was determined to feed us. I stole eggs from nests, caught fish in nets, sometimes managed to shoot a squirrel or rabbit for stew, and gathered the various plants that sprung up beneath my feet. Plants are tricky. Many are edible, but one false mouthful and you're dead. I checked and double checked the plants I had harvested with my father's pictures, kept us alive. Any sign of danger, a distant howl, the inexplicable break of a branch sent me flying to the fence at first. Then I began to risk climbing trees to escape the wild dogs that quickly got bored and moved on. Bears and cats lived deeper in, perhaps disliking the sooty reek of our district. On the 8th of May, I went to the Justice Building, signed up for my tesserae, and pulled home my first batch of grain and oil in Prim's toy wagon. On the 8th of every month, I was entitled to do the same. I couldn't stop hunting and gathering, of course. The grain was not enough to live on, and there were other things to buy: soap, milk, and bread. What we didn't absolutely have to eat, I began to trade at the hob. It was frightening to enter the place without my father at my side, but people had respected him and they accepted me. Game was game, after all, no matter who shot it. I also sold at the back doors of wealthier clients' houses, trying to remember what my father had told me, learning a few tricks as well. The butcher would buy my rabbits, but not squirrels. The baker enjoyed a squirrel, but would not trade one if his wife wasn't around, or but would only trade when his wife wasn't around. The head peacekeeper loved wild turkey. The mayor had a passion for strawberries. In late summer, I was washing up in a pond when I noticed the plants growing around me, tall, with leaves like arrowheads, blossoms with 3 white petals. I knelt down in the water, my fingers digging in the soft mud, pulled up handfuls of roots, small bluish tubers that um, didn't look like much, but boiled or baked were as good as any potato. Katness, I said aloud, is the plant I was named for. And I heard my father's voice joking, as long as you can find yourself, you'll never starve. I spent hours stirring up that pond bed with my toes and a stick, gathering the tubers that floated to the top. That night we feasted on fish and Katniss roots, and, um, until we were, all for the first time in months, full. Slowly, my mother returned to us. She began to clean and cook and preserve some of the food I brought for the winter. People traded with us or paid money for her medical remedies. One day I heard her singing. Prim was thrilled to have her back, but I kept watching and waiting for her to disappear again. I didn't trust her, and some small, gnarled piece inside me hated her for that weakness, for her neglect, for the months that she put us through. Prim forgave her, but I had taken a step back from my mother, put up a wall to protect myself from needing her, and nothing was ever the same between us again. Now that I was going to die, without that ever being set right, I thought about how I'd yelled at her today in the Justice Building. I told her I loved her too, though. Maybe that would balance it out. For a while, I stand, staring out of the train window, wishing I could open it again, but unsure of what would happen at such a high speed. In the distance, I see the lights of another district. 7? 10? I don't know. I think about the people in their houses, settling into bed. I imagine my home, the shutters drawn tight. What were they doing now, Mother and Prim? Were they able to eat supper? The fish stew and the strawberries? Or did it lie untouched on their plates? Did they watch a recap of the day's events on the battered old TV that sits on the table against the wall? Surely there were more tears. Is my mother holding up, being strong for Prim? Or has she already started to slip away, leaving the weight of the world on my sister's fragile shoulders? Prim will undoubtedly sleep with my mother tonight. Thought of that scruffy old buttercup posting himself on the bed to watch over Prim comforts me. If she cries, he will nose his way into her arms and curl up there until she calms down and falls asleep. I'm so glad I didn't drown him. Imagining my home makes me ache with loneliness. This day has been endless. Could Gail and I have been eating blackberries only this morning? It seems like a lifetime ago, like a long dream that deteriorated into a nightmare. Maybe if I go to sleep, I'll wake up back in District 12, where I belong. Probably the drawers, uh, Probably the drawers hold any number of nightgowns, but I just strip off my shirt and trousers and climb into bed in my underwear. The sheets are made of soft, silky fabric. A thick, fluffy quilt gives immediate warmth. If I'm going to cry, now's the time to do it. By morning, I'll be able to wash the damage done by the tears from my face. But no tears come. I'm too tired or numb to cry. The only thing I feel is the desire to be somewhere else, so I let the train rock me into oblivion. Grey light is leaking through the curtains when the rapping rouses me. I hear Effie Trinket's voice calling me to rise. Up, up, up. It's going to be a big, big, big day. I try and imagine for a moment what it must be like inside that woman's head. What thoughts fill her waking hours? What dreams come to her at night? I have no idea. I put the green outfit back on since it's not really dirty, but slightly crumpled from spending the night on the floor. My fingers trace the circle around the little gold mockingjay. I think of the woods and of my father and of my mother and Prim waking up. I have to get on with things. I slept, I slept in the elaborate braided hair that my mother did for the reaping. It doesn't look too bad, so I just leave it up. It doesn't matter. We can't be far from the capital now, and once we reach the city, my stylist will dictate my look for the opening ceremonies tonight anyway. I just hope I get one who doesn't think nudity is the last word in fashion. I enter the dining car. Effie Trinket brushes by me with a cup of black coffee. She's muttering obscenities under her breath. Hamish, his face puffy and red from the previous day's indulgences, is chuckling. Peter holds a roll and looks somewhat embarrassed. Sit down, says Hamish, waving me over. The moment I slide into my chair, I'm served an enormous platter of food. Eggs, ham, piles of fried potatoes, a tureen of fruit slices in ice to keep it chilled. The basket of rolls they set in front of me would have kept my family going for weeks. There's an elegant glass of orange juice. At least, I think it's orange juice. I've only ever tasted an orange once, on New Year's Day when my father brought one as a special treat. A cup of coffee. My mother adores coffee, which we could almost never afford, but it only tastes bitter and thin to me. A rich brown cup of something I've never seen. They call it hot chocolate, says Peter. It's good. I take a sip of the hot, sweet, creamy liquid, and a shudder runs through me. Even though the rest of the meal beckons, I ignored it until I've drained my cup. Then I stuff down every mouthful I can hold, which is a substantial amount, being careful not to overdo it on the richest stuff. One time my mother told me that I always eat like I'll never see food again. And I said, I won't unless I bring it home. That shut her up. When my stomach feels like it's about to split, I lean back and take in my breakfast companions. Peter is still eating, breaking off bits of roll and dipping them in hot chocolate. Hamish hasn't paid much attention to his platter, but he's knocking back a glass of red juice, which he keeps thinning with a bottle of clear liquid. Judging by the fumes, it's some kind of spirit. I don't know Hamish, but I've seen him often enough in the hob, tossing handfuls of money on the counter of the woman who sells white liquor. He'll be incoherent by the time we reach the capital. I realise I detest Hamish. No wonder the District 12 tributes never stand a chance. It isn't just what we've been underfed and the lack of training. Most of our tributes have still been strong enough to make a go of it, but we rarely get sponsors, and he's a big part of the reason why. The rich people who back tributes, either because they're betting on them or simply for the bragging rights of picking the winner, expect someone classier than Hamish to deal with. So, you're supposed to give us advice, I say to Hamish. Here's some advice. Stay alive, says Hamish, and then bursts out laughing. I exchange a look with Peter before I remember that I have nothing more to do with him. I'm surprised to see the hardness in his eyes. He generally seems so mild. That's very funny, says Peter. Suddenly he lashes out at the glass in Hamish's hand. It shatters on the floor, sending the blood red liquid running towards the back of the train. Only not to us. Hamish considers this a moment, then punches Peter in the jaw, knocking him to the floor. When he turns back to reach for the spirits, I drive my knife into the table between his hand and the bottle, barely missing his fingers. I brace myself to deflect his hit, but it doesn't come. Instead, he sits back and squints at us. Well, what's this? Says Hamish. Did I actually get a pair of fighters this year? Peter rises from the floor and scoops up a handful of ice from under the fruit tureen. He starts to rise it to the red mark on his jaw. No, says Hamish, stopping him. Let the bruise show. The odds will think uh, you've mixed it up with another tribute before you've even made it into the arena. That's against the rules, says Peter. Only if they catch you. That bruise will say you fought. You weren't caught. Even better. He turns to me. Can you hit anything with a knife beside a table? The bow and arrow is my weapon, but I spend a fair amount of time throwing knives as well. Sometimes, if I've got a wounded animal with an arrow, it's better to get a knife too before I approach it. I realise that if I want Hamish's attention, this is my moment to make an impression. I yank the knife out of the table, get a grip on the blade, and then throw it into the wall across the room. I was actually just hoping to get a good solid stick, but it lodges in the seam between two panels, making me look a lot better than I am. Stand over here, both of you, says Hamish, nodding to the middle of the room. We obey and he circles us, prodding us like animals at times, checking our muscles, examining our faces. Well, you're not entirely hopeless. Seem fit. And once the stylists get a hold of you, you'll be attractive enough. Peter and I don't question this. The Hunger Games aren't a beauty contest, but the best looking tributes always seem to pull in more sponsors. All right, I'll make a deal with you. You don't interfere with my drinking, and I'll stay sober enough to help you, says Hamish. But you have to do exactly as I say. It's not much of a deal, but still a giant step forward from 10 minutes ago when we had no guide at all. Fine, says Peter. So, so help us, I say. When we get into the arena, what's the best strategy in the cornucopia for someone? One thing at a time. In a few minutes, we'll be pulling into the station. You'll be put in the hands of your stylists. You're not going to like what they do to you, but no matter what it is, don't resist, said Hamish. But I begin. No buts, don't resist, says Hamish. He takes a bottle of spirits from the table and leaves the car. As the door swings shut behind him, the car goes dark. There's still a few lights inside, but outside it's as if night has fallen. I realise we must be in a tunnel that runs through the mountains into the capital. The mountains form a natural barrier between the capital and the eastern districts. It's almost impossible to enter from the east except through the tunnels. The geological advantage was a major factor in the districts losing the war that led to my being a tribute today. Since the rebels had to scale the mountains, they were easy targets for the capital's air forces. Peter Malark and I stand in the silence as the train speeds along. The tunnel goes on, and I think of the tons of rock separating me from the sky, and my chest tightens. I hate being encased in stone this way. It reminds me of the mines and my father, trapped, unable to reach the sunlight, buried forever in the darkness. The train finally begins to slow, and suddenly bright light floods the compartment. We can't help it. Both Peter and I run to the window to see what we've only seen on television: the capital, the ruling city of Panem. The cameras haven't lied about its grandeur. If anything, they've not quite captured its magnificence. The glistening buildings in a rainbow of hues that tower into the air, the shiny cars that roll down the wide paved street, the oddly dressed people with bizarre hair, painted faces, who've never missed a meal. All the colours seem artificial: the pinks too deep, the greens too bright, the yellows painful to the eyes, like the flat, round discs of hard candy we can never afford to buy at the tiny sweet shop in District 12. The people begin to point at us eagerly as they recognise a tribute train rolling into the city. I step away from the window, sickened by their excitement, knowing they can't wait to watch us die. But Peter holds his ground, actually waving and smiling at the gawking crowd. He only stops when the train pulls into the station, blocking us from their view. He sees me staring at him and shrugs. Who knows, he says, one of them may be rich. I may have misjudged him. I think his actions, I think of his actions since the reaping began: the friendly squeeze of my hand, his father showing up with the cookies, promising to feed Prim. Did Peter put him up to that? His tears at the station, volunteering to wash Hamish, but then challenging him this morning when apparently the nice guy approach had failed. And now, the waving at the window, already trying to win the crowd. All the pieces are still fitting together, but I sense he has a plan forming. He hasn't accepted death. He's already fighting hard to stay alive, which also means that kind Peter Malark, the boy he gave me bread, is fighting hard to kill me. Oh, end of chapter 4. We're on to chapter 5. Let's see what the chinchilla situation is. Is he there? He isn't. What a bad boy. I think he's in his hammock. I'm going to take another wee short break and I'll be back in it just a second. Just as back it goes, doesn't it? Well, it'll be back up in a minute. All right, chapter 5. We'll make this the last one. Tonight, rip. I grip my teeth as Venia, a woman with aqua hair and gold tattoos above her eyebrows, yanks a strip of fabric from my leg, tearing the hair beneath it. Sorry, she pipes in her silly capital accent. You're just so hairy. Why do these people speak in such a high pitch? Why do their jaws barely open when they talk? Why do the ends of their sentences go up as they're asking a question, as if they're asking a question? Odd vowels, clipped words, always a hiss on the letter S. No wonder it's impossible not to mimic them. Venia makes what's supposed to be a sympathetic face. Good news though, this is the last one. Ready? I get a grip on the edges of the table. I'm seated on and nod. The final swath of my leg hair is uprooted in a painful jerk. I've been in the remake centre for more than 3 hours and I still haven't met my stylist. Apparently, he has no interest in seeing me until Venia um, and one of the other members of my prep team have addressed some obvious problems. This included scrubbing down my body with a gritty foam that was removed with not which removed not only the dirt but at least 3 layers of skin, turning my nails into uniform shapes and primarily ridding my body of hair. My arms, legs, torso, underarms, parts of my eyebrows have been stripped from the stuff of the stuff, leaving me like a plucked bird ready for roasting. I don't like it. My skin feels sore and tingly and intensely vulnerable, but I've kept my side of the bargain with Hamish, and no objection has crossed my lips. You're doing very well, says some guy named Flavius. He gives his orange corkscrew locks a shake and applies a fresh coat of purple lipstick to his mouth. If there's one thing we can't stand, it's a whiner. Grease her down. Venia and Octavia, a plump woman whose entire body has been dyed a shade of pea green, rub me down with the lotion. At first it stings, but then soothes my raw skin. Then they pull me from the table, removing the thin robe that I've been allowed to wear off. I stand there, completely naked as the three circle me, wielding tweezers to remove the last few bits of hair. I know I should be embarrassed, but they're just so unlike people that I'm no more self-conscious than a trio of oddly coloured birds that were pecking around my feet. The three step back to admire their work. Excellent. You almost look human now, says Flavius, and they all laugh. I force my lips into a smile to show how grateful I am. Thank you, I say sweetly. We don't have much cause to look nice in District 12. This wins them over completely. Of course you don't, you poor darling, says Octavia, clasping her hands together in distress for me. But don't worry, says Vinia. By the time Cinna is through with you, you're going to be absolutely gorgeous. We promise you. You know now that you've got rid of all that hair and filth, you're not horrible at all, says Flavius encouragingly. Let's call Cinna. They dart out of the room. It's hard to hate my prep team. They're such total idiots, and yet, in an odd way, they're sincerely trying to help me. I look at the cold, white walls and the floor and resist the impulse to retrieve my robe, but this Cinna, my stylist, will surely make me remove it at once. Instead, my hands go to my hairdo, the one area of my body my prep team have been told to leave alone. My fingers stroke the silky braids my mother so carefully arranged. My mother. I left her blue dress and shoes on the floor of my train car, never thinking about retrieving them or trying to hold on to a piece of her, of home. Now I wish I had. The door opens and a young man, who must be Cinna, enters. I'm taken aback by how normal he looks. Most of the stylists they interview on television are so dyed, stenciled, and surgically altered they're grotesque. But Cinna's close-cropped hair appears to be its natural shade of brown. He's in a simple black shirt and trousers, The only concession to self-alteration seems to be a metallic gold eyeliner that has been applied on the right hand, on a light hand. It begins out, or it brings out the flecks of gold in his green eyes, and despite my disgust with the capital and their hideous fashions, I can't help but think how attractive it looks. "Hello, Katness, I'm Cinna, your stylist," he says in a quiet voice, somewhat lacking in the capital's affectations. "Hello," I venture cautiously. "Just give me a moment, all right?" he asks and walks around my naked body, not touching me, but taking in every centimetre with his eyes. I resist the impulse to cross my arms over at my chest. "Who did your hair?" "My mother," I say. "It's beautiful, a classic really, and an almost perfect balance with your profile. She has very clever fingers," he says. I had expected someone flamboyant, someone older, trying desperately to look young, someone who viewed me as a piece of meat to be prepared for the platter. Sin has met none of those expectations. "You're new, aren't you? I don't think I've seen you before," I say. Most of the stylists are familiar, uh, constants in the ever-changing pool of tributes. Some have been around my whole life. "Yes, this is my first year in the game," says Cinna. "So they gave you District 12, I say. Newcomers generally end up with us." "The least desirable district." "I asked for District 12, he said without further explanation. "Why don't you put on your robe and we'll have a chat?" Pulling on my robe, I follow him through the door, into the living room. Two red couches face each other, over a low table. The three walls are blank, the fourth is entirely glass, providing a window to the city. I can see by the light that it must be around noon, although the sunny sky has turned overcast. Sin invites me to sit on one of the couches and takes his place across from me. He presses a button on the side of the table. The top splits from below to rise with a second desktop that holds our lunch, chicken and chunks of oranges, cooked in a creamy sauce, laid on a bed of pearly white grain, tiny green peas, and onions, rolls shaped like flowers, and, for dessert, a pudding the colour of honey. I try to imagine assembling this meal myself back at home. Chickens are too expensive, but I could make do with a wild turkey. I'd need to shoot a second turkey to trade for the orange. Goat's milk would have been a substitute for cream. We can grow peas in the garden, but I've yet to get wild onions from the woods. I don't recognise the grain. Our own tessera ration cooks down to an unattractive brown mush. Fancy rolls would mean another trade from the baker, perhaps 2 or 3 squirrels. As for pudding, I can't even guess what's in it. Days of hunting and gathering for one meal, and then it would be a poor substitute for the capital version. What must it be like, I wonder, to live in a world where food appears at the press of a button? How would I spend the hours I now commit to combing the woods for sustenance if it were this easy to come by? What do they do all day, these people in the capital, besides decorating their bodies and waiting around for a new shipment of tributes to roll in and die for their entertainment? I look up to find Cinna's eyes trained on mine. "How despicable we must seem to you," he says. Has he seen my face, or somehow read my thoughts? He's right, though. The whole rotten lot of them is despicable. "No matter," says Cinna. "So, Katniss, what about your costume for the opening ceremonies? My partner, Portia, is the stylist for your fellow tribute, Peeta, and her current thought is to dress you in complimentary costumes," says Cinna. "As you know, it's customary to reflect the flavour of the district. For the opening ceremonies, you're supposed to wear something that suggests your district's your principal industry. District 11, agriculture. District 4, fishing. 3, factories. That means that coming from District 12, Peeta and I will be in some kind of coal miners get-up. Since the baggy miners' jumpsuits are not particularly becoming, our tributes usually end up in skimpy outfits and hats with headlamps. One year our tributes were stark naked and covered in black powder to represent coal dust. It's always dreadful and does nothing to win the favour of the crowd. I prepare myself for the worst. So, we'll be in a coal miner's outfit, I ask, hoping it won't be indecent. Not exactly. You see, Porty and I think that coal miners' things very overdone. No one will remember you in that, and we both see it as our job to make District 12 tributes unforgettable, says Cinna. I'll be naked for sure, I think. So rather than focus on the coal mining itself, we're going to focus on the coal, says Cinna. Naked and covered in black dust, I think. And what do we do with coal? We burn it, says Cinna. You're not afraid of fire, are you, Katniss? He sees my expression and grins. A few hours later, I'm dressed in what will either be the most sensational or deadliest costume in the opening ceremonies. I'm in a simple black unitard which covers me from neck to ankle. Shiny leather boots lace up to my knees, but there's a fluttering cape made of seams of yellow, red, and orange, and the matching headpiece that define the costume. Cinna plans to set them on fire before our chariot rolls into the streets. It's not a real flame, of course. You're just a little synthetic fire Portia and I came up with. You'll be perfectly safe, he says, but I'm not convinced. I won't be perfectly barbecued by the time we get to the city centre. My face is relatively clear of makeup, just a bit of highlighting here and there. My hair has been brushed out and then braided down my back in my usual style. I want the audience to recognise you when you're in the arena, says Cinna dreamily. Katniss, the girl who was on fire. It crosses my mind that Cinna's calm and normal demeanour makes him a complete masks a complete madman. Despite this morning's revelation about Peeta's character, I'm actually relieved when he shows up, dressed in an identical costume. We should know about fire, he should know about fire, being a baker's son and all. His stylist, Portia, and her team accompany him, and everyone is absolutely giddy with excitement over what a splash we'll make, except Cinna. He just seems a bit wary and accepts congratulations. We are whisked down to the bottom level of the Remake Centre, which is essentially a gigantic stable. The opening ceremonies are about to start, pairs of tributes being loaded into chariots, pulled by teams of 4 horses. Ours are coal black. The animals are so well trained, no one even needs to guide their reins. Cinna and Portia direct us to the chariot and carefully arrange our body positions. The drape of our capes before moving to consult with each other. What do you think? I whisper to Peeta about the fire. I'll rip off your cape if you'll rip off mine, he says through gritted teeth. Deal, I say. Maybe we can get them off soon enough. We'll avoid the worst burns. It's bad though. They'll throw us into the arena no matter what condition we're in. I know I promised Haymitch would do exactly what they said, but I don't think he considered this angle. Where is Haymitch anyway? Isn't he supposed to protect us from this sort of thing? Said Peeta. With all that alcohol in him, he's probably not. It's probably not advisable to have him around an open flame, I say, and we're suddenly both laughing. I guess we were just so nervous about the games, and, more pressingly, petrified about being turned into human torches, we're not acting sensibly. The opening music begins. It's easy to hear, blasted around the capital. Massive doors open, revealing the crowd-lined streets. The ride lasts about 20 minutes and ends up in the city centre circle, where they will welcome us, play the anthem, and escort us into the training centre that will be our home/prison until the games begin. The tributes from District 1 ride out in chariots pulled by snow-white horses. They look so beautiful, spray-painted in silver, and tasteful tunics glittered with jewels. District 1 makes luxury items for the capital. You can hear the roar of the crowd. They're always favourites. District 2 gets him to position to follow them. In no time at all, we're approaching the door, and I can see that between the overcast sky and the evening hour, the sky is turning grey. The tributes from District 11 are just rolling out when Sin appears with a lighted torch. Here we go then, he says, and before we can react, he sets our capes on fire. I gasp, waiting for the heat, but there's only a slight tickling sensation. Cinna climbs up before us and ignites our headdresses. He lets out a sigh of relief. It works, and then gently tucks a hand under my chin. Remember, heads held high, smiles, they're going to love you. Cinna jumps off the chariot and has one last idea. He shouts something at us, but the music drowns him out. He shouts again and gestures. What's he saying? I ask Peter for the first time. I look at him and realize that ablaze with the fake flames, he's dazzling, and I must be too. I think he said for us to hold hands, said Peter. He grabs my right hand in his left, and we look to Cinna for confirmation. He nods and gives us a thumbs up, and that's the last thing I see before we enter the city. The crowd's initial alarm at our appearance quickly changes to cheers and shouts of District 12. Every head is turned our way, pulling the focus from the three chariots ahead of us. At first, I'm frozen, but then I catch sight of us on a large television, and I'm floored by how breathtaking we look. In the deepening twilight, the firelight illuminates our faces. We seem to be leaving a trail of fire off the flowing capes. Cinna was right about the minimal makeup. We both look more attractive, but utterly unrecognizable. Remember, heads held high, smiles, they're going to love you. I hear Cinna's voice in my head. I lift my chin a bit higher, put on my most winning smile, and wave with my free hand. I'm now glad I have Peter to clutch for balance. He's so steady, solid as a rock. As I gain confidence, I actually blow a few kisses to the crowd. The people of the capital are going nuts, showering us with flowers, shouting our names, our first names, which they have bothered to find in the programme. The pounding music, the cheers, the admiration work their way into my blood, and I can't suppress my excitement. Sin has given me a great advantage. No one will forget me, not my look, not my name. Katness, the girl who was on fire. For the first time, I feel a flicker of hope rising up in me. Surely there must be one sponsor willing to take me on, and with a little extra help, some food and the right weapon, I shouldn't count myself out for the games. Someone throws me a red rose. I catch it, give it a delicate sniff, and blow a kiss back in the general direction of the giver. 100 hands reach up to catch my kiss, as if it were a real, tangible thing. Katniss, Katniss, I hear my name being called from all sides. Everyone wants my kisses. It's not until we enter the city circle that I realized I must have completely stopped I must have completely stopped the circulation in Peter's hand. That's how tightly I'd been holding it. I looked down at our linked fingers. As I loosen my grasp, he regains his grip on me. No, don't let go of me, he says. The firelight flickers off his blue eyes. Please, I might fall out of this thing. Okay, I say, and keep holding on, but I can't help but feeling strange about the way Cinna has asked us to stay together. It's not really fair to present us as a team and then lock us into the arena for us to kill each other. The 12 chariots fill the loop of the city circle. On the buildings that surround the circle, every window is packed with the most prodigious citizens of the capital. Our horses pull up our chariot right to the President Snow's mansion, and we've come to a halt. The music ends with a flourish. The President, a small, thin man with paper white hair, gives the official welcome from the balcony above us. It's traditional to cut away to the faces of the tributes during the speech, but I can see the cameras, but I can see on the screen they were getting way more than our share of airtime. The darker it becomes, the more difficult it is to take your eyes off our flickering. When the national anthem plays, they do make an effort to do a quick cut around to each pair of tributes, but the camera holds on District 12 chariots as it parades around the circle one final time and disappears into the training centre. The doors have only just shut behind us when we're engulfed by prep teams who are utterly unintelligible as they babble out praise. I glance around, notice a lot of other tributes are shooting us dirty looks, which confirms what I've suspected. We've literally outshone them all. Then Cinna and Portia are there, helping us down from our chariot, carefully removing our flaming capes and headdresses. Portia extinguishes them with some kind of spray from a canister. I realize I'm still glued to Peta and force my stiff fingers to open. We both massage our hands. Thanks for keeping hold of me. I was getting a little shaky there, says Peta. It didn't show, I tell him. I'm sure no one noticed. I'm sure they didn't notice anything but you. You should wear flames more often, he says. They suit you. And then he gives me a smile that seems so genuinely sweet, as just the right touch of shyness and unexpected warmth rushes through me. A warning bell goes off in my head. Don't be so stupid. Pete is planning how to kill you, I remind myself. He's luring you in to make you easy prey. The more likable he is, the more deadly he is. But two can play at that game. I stand on tiptoe and kiss his cheek, right on his bruise. End of chapter 5. Gonna leave it there for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Um, yes, these should be up on YouTube, no bother. And I don't know if I'm going to stream tomorrow. Might do a wee short one. I'll see. But you'll get the notification if you're a follower. And if you're on YouTube, follow me here as well. On Twitch, I stream here. I won't be able to upload all my streams onto YouTube for copyright reasons. I can do a few chapters. We might go about halfway into the book, but I'll finish off the rest here. If you'd like to hear the rest, I'll be reading it. And thanks for listening.